The city doesn't announce itself. It simply moves. You step into streets where motion feels unhurried, where footsteps echo against old stone and smooth pavement in equal measure. Cars pass without urgency. Conversations drift from cafe patios, half in English, half in Spanish, sometimes blending into something warmer and harder to define. San Antonio doesn't pull you forward, it lets you fall into its rhythm. You notice how the sidewalks curve gently instead of racing straight ahead. Storefronts don't shout for attention. They wait. A corner cafe hums softly, chairs scraping, cups clinking, laughter low and unforced. The air feels lived in, not staged, like a city that exists for its people first and visitors second. There's a sense of layering here. New glass buildings reflect older brick and limestone, not trying to replace them, just standing beside them. You feel the contrast without needing it explained. This is a place where time overlaps instead of competing. As you walk, you begin to sense how personal this city feels. Strangers nod. Someone holds a door a second longer than expected. Street musicians don't perform at the city. They perform with it, letting the sound float rather than dominate. Even the traffic feels conversational, pauses and flows working together instead of clashing. San Antonio isn't loud about who it is. It reveals itself slowly. You start noticing small details. Murals painted into unexpected alleys, handwritten menus taped inside bakery windows, plants spilling over balconies as if nature was invited rather than controlled. The city feels warm without trying to be impressive, comfortable without becoming dull. There's movement everywhere, but it's not rushed. People walk with purpose, yet without tension. Workers step out for coffee, families drift toward shaded paths, friends linger instead of scrolling. It feels like a city that understands balance, between work and rest, tradition and change, privacy and openness. You don't feel like you're touring a destination. You feel like you're briefly borrowing a life. Some cities try to overwhelm you with landmarks. San Antonio does something quieter. It surrounds you with atmosphere, with the feeling that daily life here matters. That mornings aren't just beginnings and evenings aren't just endings, but transitions people actually enjoy. The sounds are soft but constant. Shoes on stone, distant music, water moving somewhere nearby, unseen but present. You don't need to know where everything leads yet. The city seems content letting you wander without instructions. There's an emotional ease that settles in before you realize it. You stop checking directions. You slow down. You begin to observe rather than search. San Antonio doesn't reward urgency, it rewards attention. And as you stand there, absorbed in the flow of streets and voices and passing moments, you start to understand something important. This city isn't asking you to visit, it's inviting you to stay a while. Movement in San Antonio feels intentional, but never tense. Streets breathe here. You notice how traffic flows without constant urgency, how pedestrians cross with confidence, trusting the city to meet them halfway. The pace encourages awareness, not rushing, not lingering too long, just existing comfortably within the moment. You pass through streets where daily life unfolds quietly. Workers step out of offices with loosened shoulders. Delivery drivers exchange casual greetings. Small businesses open their doors wide, not to lure you in, but to let the inside spill gently outward. Life here doesn't hide behind walls. It lives close to the sidewalk. There's a rhythm to how people move through the city. Mornings carry calm purpose, afternoons soften into flexibility, and evenings don't rush to arrive. You sense that schedules exist, but they don't dominate. San Antonio seems to value how time feels just as much as how it's used. The streets tell stories without narration. Residential roads narrow into shaded corridors where trees lean protectively over parked cars. Main avenues widen and brighten, lined with shops, restaurants, and places that blur the line between work and leisure. You don't feel the need to distinguish between districts. The city transitions naturally, without abrupt changes. People dress practically but expressively. Comfort matters here. You see it in worn sneakers, relaxed button-downs, sun hats, and backpacks that suggest lives lived outside of rigid routines. This isn't a city obsessed with appearances. It's more interested in ease. You begin to notice how community shapes movement. Parents walk children toward schools without hurry. Friends meet mid-sidewalk and talk without apology for blocking the way. Cyclists glide past with patience, not aggression. Even silence feels shared rather than awkward. San Antonio's lifestyle leans outward. People spend time outside because the city invites it, through wide walkways, shaded paths, open plazas. You sense that staying indoors too long would feel like missing something. Life here happens where people can see each other. There's also a quiet work ethic woven into the streets. You notice it in early opening cafes, in construction crews moving steadily rather than frantically, in offices that feel active but not overwhelming. The city supports ambition without demanding constant intensity. You pass fitness studios, barbershops, corner markets, and family-owned restaurants that look like they've served the same neighbors for years. Nothing feels temporary. Even new spaces feel grounded, designed to last rather than trend. Public spaces act like shared living rooms. Benches are used, steps become seating, small plazas fill naturally without planned events. People don't wait for permission to exist here, they simply do. As you walk, you realize how little pressure you feel. There's no expectation to perform, consume, or document every moment. The city doesn't compete for your attention. It allows you to notice it on your own terms. San Antonio's streets reflect a lifestyle built around sustainability, emotional as much as practical. Work matters, but so does rest. Social connection isn't scheduled, it's spontaneous. The city doesn't fragment life into categories. It blends them. You feel it in the way strangers share space without friction. In the way noise never overwhelms. In how even busy areas feel manageable rather than exhausting. At some point, you stop observing from the outside. You start matching the pace without trying. Your steps slow slightly. Your breathing deepens. You move with the city instead of through it. And that's when you understand, San Antonio isn't shaped by motion alone. It's shaped by how people choose to live inside that motion. The city begins to feel more personal as you drift into its neighborhoods. Streets narrow again, not in limitation but in intimacy. Houses sit comfortably beside one another, each with its own character. Porches that invite conversation, small yards shaped by care rather than design, windows open just enough to let life pass through. Every neighborhood carries its own mood. Some feel lively, textured by music and conversation spilling into the street. Others feel quieter, held together by routine and familiarity. You sense the difference immediately, not through signs, but through sound. Laughter, footsteps, the clink of dishes from nearby kitchens. Cafes appear where you don't expect them, tucked into corners, set back from the road, or quietly anchored on neighborhood streets. They don't compete for attention. They earn loyalty. Inside, the atmosphere feels lived in, people reading without hurry, laptops open but not dominating, conversations that stretch longer than planned. You notice how cafes function as more than places to eat or drink. They act as informal meeting points. Ideas are exchanged casually, friendships linger, work blends with rest, no one seems rushed to leave once they've arrived. Time softens in these spaces. Parks arrive like pauses in a sentence. Some are expansive, others small and shaded, but all feel intentional. They're not empty displays of greenery, they're used. Families gather under trees. Individuals sit alone without feeling isolated. Joggers pass quietly, respectful of the stillness around them. You sense how important these spaces are to the city's emotional health. They allow breathing room. They create balance. They remind people that movement doesn't always mean progress. Sometimes it means presence. Neighborhood parks feel especially personal. They belong to the people around them, shaped by repeated use rather than official planning. Benches show where. Paths curve where people naturally walk. These aren't places meant to impress, they're meant to hold everyday life. You pass local shops that seem to exist purely because someone cared enough to open them. Bookstores with uneven shelves, markets with handwritten signs, bakeries where the smell reaches the sidewalk before the entrance does. Nothing feels mass-produced. Everything feels intentional, even when imperfect. The neighborhoods don't separate themselves from the city, they extend it. You don't feel like you've left urban life behind. Instead, it feels more human here, more grounded. The city reveals itself not through skyline views, but through how people occupy space together. As you move from cafe to park to quiet residential street, you begin to feel how connection works in San Antonio. It's not loud, it's not performative, it's steady. People recognize each other. They remember faces. They notice absences. You also notice how welcoming the city feels without being intrusive. You're allowed to observe without being questioned, to participate without being pressured, to belong temporarily without needing explanation. There's a comfort in knowing that even if you stopped walking and stayed still for a while, the city would continue around you without disruption. Life here doesn't require constant attention. It unfolds naturally. As the neighborhoods soften your perspective, you realize something subtle but important. This city doesn't build connection through spectacle. It builds it through repetition, through daily walks, familiar cafes, parks that hold memories quietly. And as you continue moving forward, You begin to wonder how a city this calm supports ambition, education, and opportunity beneath the surface. Beneath the calm exterior, the city carries a steady sense of purpose. You feel it in the early movement near campuses, in the quiet focus of people heading into work, in the way conversations often drift toward plans rather than pressure. San Antonio doesn't broadcast ambition, it integrates it into daily life. Schools and learning spaces feel woven into the city rather than set apart from it. Campuses blend with neighborhoods, open rather than isolated. You notice students moving through the city comfortably, as if education here isn't confined to classrooms. Learning feels like part of the environment, not an obligation. There's a grounded practicality to how people talk about work. Careers aren't framed as status symbols. They're discussed as tools, ways to build stability, flexibility, and time. You sense that success here is measured less by appearance and more by sustainability. Jobs exist across a wide spectrum, and you feel that diversity in how people carry themselves. Healthcare workers, educators, creatives, tech professionals, service staff, all move through the same streets without hierarchy. No single industry defines the city. That balance keeps the atmosphere steady, even when things change. Workplaces don't feel distant or unreachable. Offices, studios, and small businesses are scattered throughout the city, making opportunity feel present rather than centralized. You don't get the sense that everything important happens behind closed doors or far away from daily life. There's also room here to start something small. You notice it in the independent shops, the local services, the quietly successful family businesses. The city seems to support gradual growth rather than instant success. Ideas are allowed to mature instead of being rushed. Students don't feel disconnected from the city once their classes end. They become part of the daily rhythm, studying in cafes, working part-time, participating in community spaces. Education doesn't separate generations here. It connects them. You sense a respect for balance in how people approach work. Long hours exist, but they don't define identity. People leave space for family, for rest, for personal routines. Ambition feels steady, not consuming. Opportunities feel approachable because the city itself feels approachable. You don't feel dwarfed by scale or lost in intensity. The environment allows you to imagine a life here without needing to reinvent yourself entirely. There's also an unspoken sense of security. Not perfection, but reliability. Systems feel present, support networks feel close. The city doesn't promise constant excitement, it offers consistency, which can be just as valuable. As you move through areas shaped by work and learning, you realize how quietly the city supports growth. Not through pressure, but through space. Not through competition, but through accessibility. San Antonio doesn't push people to chase endless upward motion. It gives them room to build something that lasts. And as ambition settles into the background, another side of the city begins to surface, one shaped by enjoyment, creativity, and shared experiences. Enjoyment in the city feels layered rather than concentrated. You don't arrive at a single destination and feel like you found everything. Instead, pleasure reveals itself gradually, in moments, in choices, in how people decide to spend their time once obligations loosen their grip. Entertainment here doesn't demand attention. It invites participation. Music drifts from open spaces without overpowering the street. Laughter rises from restaurants where tables feel shared rather than separate. You sense that enjoyment isn't scheduled into rigid events, it's woven into everyday life. Attractions don't stand apart from the city's rhythm. They blend into it. People move in and out naturally, without spectacle or urgency. You notice how locals and visitors occupy the same spaces without friction, each experiencing the city at their own pace. There's a quiet confidence in how the city presents its places to enjoy. It doesn't need to exaggerate. Whether it's a public space designed for gathering, a cultural venue offering creative escape, or a simple place to sit and observe, the city allows enjoyment to feel personal rather than prescribed. You feel this especially in the evenings. The city doesn't transform, it softens. Lights glow rather than flash. Conversations deepen instead of multiplying. Nightlife exists, but it doesn't overwhelm. It accommodates different energies, lively, relaxed, reflective, without forcing one to dominate. Shopping areas feel less like destinations and more like extensions of neighborhoods. You browse without pressure. You wander without agenda. Stores feel curated rather than commercial, reflecting taste rather than trend. Food plays a central role in enjoyment here, but not as spectacle. Meals feel social, grounded, familiar. People linger. Tables stay occupied longer than expected. Eating becomes less about consumption and more about connection. You notice how public spaces encourage shared experience. People gather without needing a reason. Performances happen without stages. Celebration doesn't require announcement. The city leaves room for spontaneous joy. There's also a sense of safety in how people enjoy themselves. Not perfection, but comfort. You feel allowed to relax, to stay out longer, to explore without constant vigilance. That ease shapes how enjoyment unfolds. The city doesn't push you toward excitement. It lets you discover it. And as entertainment blends into daily life, you begin to see how all these pieces, movement, work, neighborhoods, enjoyment, form something cohesive. Something difficult to summarize but easy to feel. The city doesn't compete for your affection. It earns it quietly, and in that quiet confidence, San Antonio reveals its most defining quality, one that goes beyond places and experiences. What makes this city feel different isn't something you can point to easily. It's not a single street, or place, or experience. It's the way everything holds together without tension. San Antonio doesn't feel like it's trying to prove itself. It knows what it offers, and it's comfortable letting you discover it slowly. You realize that the city never asked you to adapt to it. Instead, it adjusted around you. It allowed you to move at your own pace, to notice what mattered to you, to skip what didn't. That quiet flexibility becomes its defining trait. The people carry this same energy. Open without being intrusive, proud without being loud. There's an ease in how cultures overlap here, not competing for space but sharing it naturally. Traditions feel lived in, not preserved behind glass. Modern life exists alongside them without erasing what came before. San Antonio doesn't separate daily life from meaning. Work, rest, celebration, and routine flow into one another. You don't feel pressured to optimize every moment. You feel invited to experience them fully. There's also a sense of emotional safety here. The feeling that you could build a life without constantly defending it. That you could be ambitious without becoming exhausted. Social without becoming overwhelmed. Independent without becoming isolated. The city doesn't rush you toward conclusions. It lets you sit with impressions. Let them change. Let them deepen. Even as you prepare to leave a street, a cafe, or a park behind, nothing feels finished. It feels paused, waiting for you to return. You begin to understand why people stay. Not because the city demands loyalty, but because it offers continuity. A place where days can feel complete without being dramatic. Where growth doesn't require constant reinvention. San Antonio feels human in a way that's becoming rare. It respects scale. It values connection. It allows silence. It leaves space between moments instead of filling every gap. As the city fades slightly from your immediate view, it doesn't disappear. It lingers, not as a highlight reel, but as a feeling. A sense of calm confidence, of balance, of quiet belonging. Some cities impress you, some excite you. This one stays with you.